archaeology, compelling witness to Bible truth. Now, I thought I'd say from the outset that I don't actually have much archaeological experience, qualifications. Suffice to say, the most I've dug up is probably shells at the beach. So, most of what I have tonight is purely based on research that you could go home in your own time and find for yourselves. So hopefully tonight we'll look through the research that I've gone through and be able to match up artifacts to scriptural references and help illuminate or reinforce the record of the Bible. But before we kind of get into the dirt and the grit and the history and stuff, I just want to spend 5 minutes to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of tonight's topic. So archaeology. Great place to start is with a definition. So by definition is the study of human history, prehistory, through the excavation of sites and the analysis of artifacts and other physical remains. So firstly, it's a study, or other definitions. I think Britannicus says it's a science. Therefore, as with all other sciences, your maths, your physics, whatever, you collect individual facts, and then from those facts you extrapolate meaningful interpretations that are especially relevant to us as a human race. So no point doing your science unless you got meaning for it. Also says that you got archaeology, which excavates or digs up any physical remains, and then you try and work out the story or the history behind that artifact. For example, let's start with an ancient site we all know quite well, a pyramid. Imagine you're just walking along the sands of Egypt and you stumble across a pyramid, or what you probably don't even know what's called a pyramid. But you stumble across what you presume is a mass of sandstone blocks, just all stacked on top of each other up to a nice, well, let's say for a fact 140 meters tall, because that's the height of the Giza pyramids. So you just have a bunch of facts where you got sandstone blocks capped to yay high, yay wide. So you don't actually know what it is or knowing how it got there, because it's clearly not a natural phenomenon, it's man-made. So does it have a purpose? Where can we find more about it? And so there's two overarching methods that archaeologists use in order to work out when and where from history. So for dating in archaeology, they use one of the two overarching methods is relative dating. So that's looking at geological, regional, or cultural references which are to the same period. This method doesn't actually give specific dates. It's just a great way of going, okay, this object is older than this object, or these two objects are from the same era, and therefore you can compare them and help interpret each other. So that's one way of doing it. The other is absolute dating. So this is your radiocarbon dating or your dendrochronology. I do believe you said that correctly. So you have carbon dating, which is done by measuring apparently the amount of carbon-14 atoms present in a sample that's carbon-based, so anything material of living organism origin, and then comparing that to a internationally used reference standard for saying with yay amount of carbon is yay old and so on and so forth. The other method, dendrochronology, you probably all know what it is, but don't you know it's the actual term for it. It's by definition the science or technique of dating events, environmental change, or archaeological artifacts using the characteristic patterns of annual growth rings in timber or trees. So you probably all know that every year you have a ring on the tree, so when you do a cross-sectional cut of a tree, you know how old the tree is by how many rings. That's dendrochronology, as I found out, which is quite cool. So when we come to look at our artifacts tonight, we're mostly going to be looking at relative dating. So going, look, this is from this time period because of either names it says, cities which it mentions, or specific events. So when we come to archaeology and the Bible, I just want to make a couple of things before we kind of jump into kind of prep a mindset coming to it. So as Christadelphians, we believe that the Bible is the true and accurate record with a consistent message of salvation throughout. 2 Timothy 3:16, verse 15 says that all scripture is given by inspiration of God. So if God is the author of scripture, everything we can believe in the Bible is true. So when we come to the Bible and archaeology, we already have a true record and go, okay, how does this fit in with the Bible? Second thought, I probably just thought worth mentioning, is the Bible is not primarily a history book. It's a book about God and salvation. It's about a book of people. It's not a book of this happened in this year by this person at this date and so on and so forth. Yes, there are books about genealogies and people, but it's not a history book as you would get in your school libraries or whatever. The other one I thought I'd mention is the Bible focuses on the nation of Israel. So we all know, as of 2022, when you look at any map, there's the nation of Israel in the Middle East with Turkey above, Egypt below, and Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan to the east of it. So when we come to any archaeological facts, you're not going to find anything to do with the Americas. So your Aztecs, there's going to be none of that. Even Aboriginal or Indigenous Australian history here in Australia, it's not going to come up because it's specifically to do with the nation of Israel. Because the nation of Israel is God's chosen people. Isaiah 43 verse 10 is that ye are my witnesses, that Israel is God's chosen people. And I thought I would say that archaeology is the remains of history. It helps illuminate the Bible. So we have the factual record, as it were, and these physical artifacts are helping us understand or illuminate and reassure our conviction in the things that are true, as it says on the screen. So hopefully tonight we'll go through a few things and go, oh yeah, that matches the Bible really well because of this, this and this. So it's all good and well to say we're going to have these valid historical artifacts, but I just thought I wanted to start with the validity of the Bible itself with the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is also archaeology. Great, funnily enough. So the Dead Sea Scrolls, also known as the Qumran Cave Scrolls, they're ancient Jewish and Hebrew religious manuscripts that were discovered in 1946. Upon examining, they found that they're dated to between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century AD, just before the time, or around the time of Jesus Christ. They're considered to be, as Wikipedia says, keystones in the history of archaeology with historical, religious, and linguistic significance. So not only does it collaborate of historical events, yes, these happened, but also collaborates the Bible and also linguistic for those who love their languages. It's the oldest living manuscripts of the Bible included in the canon of scriptures, and over 85 of the manuscripts found in these caves were fragments from books of the Bible. Books like majority of Isaiah was found, several chapters of Habakkuk, majority of the Genesis record, parts of Exodus, Leviticus, most of Numbers and Deuteronomy, several chapters in Ezekiel, Daniel's mentioned, even the Psalms, there's several chapters there, most of the chapters of Job, a few deciphered paragraphs from Ruth, Lamentations, the whole of 1 Kings, and even the opening of Song of Solomon. It says in one other place that nearly all Old Testament books, excluding, I'm not sure why, the book of Esther, has some form of fragment found in these Dead Sea Scrolls. And the thing with these Dead Sea Scrolls is that, according to one source, they were found to be 99.5% identical to the Bible, which you could buy from the shelves in any bookshop today in 2022. The Bible's text, its message, what it says, word for word, has not changed. So when we come to compare these, actually they're all stone tablets or whatever, that they are valid, and also the Bible is valid, so you can compare them with a lot of confidence. So I'm just going to go through a quick few examples before we kind of stick our teeth into anything particularly. So to name a few examples, Babylon. Babylon was found back in 1899 and excavated between that time until 1917. It's found out in the north of Iraq today. It's not exactly accessible due to war, civil unrest and everything, but through the several archaeological digs done through it, they've discovered a lot. I think actually I was reading somewhere that if you go to see it today, there's an oil pipe going through one of the outer walls. A lot of it's inhabited because it's all been cleared out, and so it's literally just structural buildings standing there. So as you can see kind of on the bottom right, if you want, it's just a skeleton, so people are kind of to start to go back in. But back in its heyday, we have the Ishtar Gate on the right, which was taken by a very wealthy archaeologist from Germany, and he decided to take it brick by brick and took it all the way to Berlin, where it stands today in the Berlin Museum. Babylon's mentioned 288 times in the Bible. We've obviously got the Babylonian kingdom, Daniel or Belshazzar was taken into captivity into Babylon, and many prophecies about the falling of Babylon, both literally when the Medes and Persians took over it, and also latter day symbolic in Revelation. Another one, Ur of the Chaldees. This site was first identified as Ur in 1849, but was most of it was excavated, that's the word, in 1853 to 1855. In the 1920s and 30s, a British archaeologist, Leonard Wooldley, dug up some 35,000 different artifacts from Ur, including spectacular remains of a royal cemetery that included over 2,000 burials of various golden helmets, crowns, jewellery that all dated back to about 2600 BC. It was found roughly the same time as King Tutankhamun's tomb. So that, obviously it was a lesser discovery, so it didn't make much of the headlines compared to the jewels and the gold and wonders of King Tut's tomb. So it had multiple excavations. I think I read somewhere that one of the boats going back to Europe was taken over by pirates. So there's a lot of artifacts under the underground market throughout the world somewhere from this site, but I don't know, search as you will. Although it is now found in a very flat, dry plain, Ur was once a bustling port by the river Euphrates, and over time we'll see the river Euphrates has changed course and direction, with canals filled with merchant ships, warehouses, and weaving factories. The massive stepped pyramid, or ziggurat, which you see in the far distance, it rose above the history's landscape as it did today. Just one thing I want to kind of caught my eye, was that when they were excavating the four corners of the ziggurat at the top, there was found a clay cylinder bearing the inscription of Nabonidus, which is the last king of Babylon, about 539 BC. And on this clay cylinder at the very bottom, it has a closing prayer. And in this prayer, it mentions his son, or prays for his son, Belshazzar. Belshazzar being the same name as Daniel given to him in Babylon. What makes it more interesting is that evidence was found prior to restorations that Dagon of Ishin and Shushan of Ur, the king of Babylon in the 14th century, claimed to have rebuilt this temple. So again, Babylon links. Whether that was the identical Daniel or Belshazzar in Babylon, I think it's a little bit debatable, but something it is, something it isn't, which I thought was quite interesting. So I kind of want to get into a few more specific artifacts. The first one is the Merneptah Stele. I believe that's the pharaoh's name, so hence I'm just going to go with Pharaoh's stone. It was discovered in 1896 by British archaeologist Flinders Petrie. Discovered this 2 meters tall inscribed granite monument. It was found in the Thebes Luxor West Temple. That's the very south of Egypt on the western side of the Nile. It can be found today in the Museum of Cairo, should you wish a visit. And it's one of the earliest undisputable mentions of the nation of Israel from a non-biblical record. So the stone was created by Pharaoh Merneptah, the pharaoh, son of Ramesses II, which is quite a notable pharaoh for his military victories. Third dot point on the screen, it reads halfway down that Cana is captive with all woe, Ashkelon is conquered, Giza seized, Yanoah made non-existent, and Israel laid waste bare of seed. So So when it comes to timing of where this stone fits in history, there's a little ambiguity, I think that's the word, as to where it fits in, because there's a lot of debate over the exact dates of when the children of Israel came out of the Promised Land, went through the Red Sea, came out of Egypt into the Promised Land, crossed the Red Sea, walked in the wilderness for 40 years, and then came into the land of Canaan. So it's enough to say that they're referred to as a people that would suggest that they've been settled there for a long enough time to become settled and become enough of a nation for a pharaoh to want to note it in his military expertise. So it's fair to say that it's probably somewhere after the time of Joshua and in the early times of the Judges. So it's undisputably one of the first ones where Israel's mentioned. It does talk about the complete desolation of Israel, as the quote says on the screen, but it's widely accepted that Pharaoh Merneptah was grossly exaggerating. After all, the nation of Israel is still recognizable today. Plus you have Judaism, Islam, and after a while Christianity coming from the nation of Israel. And they're around today, proving they were not wiped out as Israel's laid to waste and bare of seed, as he claims to say. But obviously, it's, as you probably all know well, the victor is always the one that writes history. So when it comes to reading artifacts like this, you've got to wonder, well, this is probably a little bit exaggerated to make it sound better, because obviously the artifacts that remain are the ones that survived or won battles. So regardless of what the inscription says, it mentions Israel, several cities roundabout, and proving that they were at least a notable nation at that time. The next one I want to look at is the Tel Dan inscription, I believe found in the city of Dan, found in 1993. This inscription commemorates the victory of the Armenian king over two southern neighboring nations. You've got the nation of Israel, or he beats the king of Israel and the king of the house of David. So this inscription is on permanent display in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. It was discovered by Avram Barin. It was a small broken slab that was discovered, believed to be part of a large victory stele or stone to commemorate the Armenian king's victory. It's dated back to the 9th century BC, where King David, as it says in the inscription, and became to know as the Tel Dan inscription, which provides the first historical external of the Bible evidence of David's existence. The broken inscription refers to the house of David. So we've got David, because he's got a family, a seed, a house after him, and he's also the king of Israel. So that if the descendants are king, it's logical enough to say that his forefathers were a king. So we have King David, the very one and the same found in the book of the Bible. So the Armenian king boasts that he, under divine guidance of his god Hadad, vanquishes several thousand Israelite and Judite horsemen and charioteers before permanently dispatching both his royal opponents. And unfortunately, the recovered fragments of the House of David inscription does not preserve the names of the specific kings involved. But most scholars believe that it recounts the campaign of Hazael of Damascus, when he defeated both Jehoram of Israel and Ahaziah of Judah. So when the inscription may not give us a lot of information about what's going on, what we can definitely say and be clear is that the existence of King David, he was a real living person who walked this earth, and we have a lot of his life recorded in the Bible. Another one I'll look at is the Mesha Stele or stone, otherwise came to known as the Moabite stone, found in the 1870s, where it was a bunch of fragments. You can see it's kind of being pulled together, and it only had 2/3 because they obviously, back when it first found, they divided up the stone because it's valuable to have a piece of archaeological history that refers to the Bible. So I think it was back in the 1900s where someone decided to buy it all back together and put it back together. It was written by Mesha, the king of Moab, back in the late 9th century. It's on display at the Louvre Museum in Paris, should you ever want a visit, although there is a copy in the University of Chicago. The inscription describes two aspects of how Mesha led Moab against the victory against ancient Israel. First, he claims to have defeated ancient Israel on many fronts, capturing or reclaiming many cities and slaying its inhabitants. And then secondly, the stone goes on to claim the many reconstructions or repairs that he did to many cities and buildings, including a fortress, king's residence, and the water systems for many cities. Unfortunately, the last 5 lines are too broken to understand, so they're unsure as to how the stone actually ends. However, this is in relation to 2 Kings chapter 3. So if you turn there with me, we can kind of work out where this piece of history fits in with the Bible. 2 Kings chapter 3. So 2 Kings chapter 3 and verse 5. We have, it came to pass that when Ahab was dead, that the king of Moab rebelled against Israel, or I think where verse 7 specifically says rebels, is pretty much war, because he's asking, do I go to battle against Moab? So it's quite a serious rebellion, it's war. So when Ahab dies, Moab thinks, oh, great vulnerable time to attack Israel, and this is a great time because they have no king. So the inscription, as it says on the next slide, so halfway down the stone, it says that the men of Gad lived in the land of Atroth from ancient times, and that the king of Israel built Atroth for himself. Another one there. And then to that second, the 7th line of the stone, where it says that Anchemos, who's the god of the Moabites, said to me, go take Nebo from Israel. And I went down all night and I fought against it from the break of dawn until noon, and I took it. So when you look at the record in 2 Kings chapter 3, from verse 5, and you have that Moab came up against Israel, as the king of Mesha, the king of Moab, claims also in his stone. Verse 7, you have Jehoshaphat going, shall I go up against Moab, who's come against me? He says, I will go up, and which way? He goes by Edom at the end of verse 8. Verse 9, the king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom go 7 days' journey through the wilderness. And that's kind of what I highlighted here, where we've got, I went in the night, fought against the break of dawn until noon, and took it. So this is less than 24 hours for the king of Moab to come down and take over Moab. But we got at least a 7-day response according to the Bible. So hence, maybe this is enough time for this tablet to have that paragraph or two inscribed, or whether it was at the end of his life. It's kind of my conjecture, that he went, okay, what great battles have I got, or great victories in my life, and needed something to prove it, so he went with one of these. Whether it be the former or the latter, they're both identical in record. So after you have the whole problem with no water for the 3 combined armies, you come to verse 20, where Elisha prays and brings rain and meat offering for the army going against Moab. And then verse 21, we pick up the record. And when all the Moabites heard that the kings would come up to fight against them, they gathered all their armies and put on armour and upward and stood on the border. And they arose up early in the morning, and the sun shone upon the water that God had given through Elisha's prayer. And the Moabites saw the water on the other side and saw it as red as blood. And they said, oh, this is the blood of the kings are surely slain, and they have smitten one another. Now therefore Moab to the spoil. And when they came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites rose up and smote the Moabites. So they fled before them, and they went forward, smiting the Moabites even to their own country. And then at the end, verse 27, verse 26, when the king of Moab saw that the battle was too sore for him, he took 700 of his men and that drew swords to break through the kingdom of Edom, but they could not. He ends up taking his eldest son and offered him up to Chemos, as we find out in the stone, his offering to a god, and burnt him on the wall, quite grotesquely. And there was great indignation against Israel, and they departed from him and returned unto their own land. So quite a retreat after 7 days of taking Moab. He decides to write about it either between those 7 days or at the end of his life when he's got nothing else to write about. But here we have the two collaborating. And at the very end, I thought that was also another very interesting remark, that he says that I took the vessels of Yahweh, which is the God of Israel, mentioned in the Bible, and hauled them before the faces of Chemos. So another reason probably why God decided to go up against the Moabites. So in this stone here, we have the cities of Jahaz and Nebo, both mentioned in the Bible. We have, as we saw, the Israelite God Yahweh mentioned, the kingdom of Israel, and I didn't mention it, but a few lines up from that, we have the house of Omri, which is also mentioned in the Bible. So now I kind of want to come back to our reading that we had to do with Hezekiah. We'll spend a bit more time here in 2 Chronicles chapter 32, or the corresponding chapter in 2 Kings, 1 Kings 19. 1 Kings 19, I think it is, with Hezekiah and Sennacherib. So first of all, we have here on the screen a seal of Hezekiah, or otherwise known as a bulla. This was discovered in 1987 and dates around to 700 BC, which is the time you would expect for Hezekiah. The bulla, which mentions, as it says in the scale, approximately 1 centimetre across, and bears the seal and impression depicting a two-winged sun disc flanked with an annex symbol, which is that one on the side there. So you've got the two-winged sun with the annex symbol, and it contains the Hebrew inscription belonging to Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah. So we can see we've got King Ahaz, because he's a king of Judah, King Hezekiah, and son of Ahaz, Ahaz being the father of Hezekiah, as it also says in the Bible. So this was found in the ancient Near East, so the old city of David in the east of it. Clay bullas, they were made to secure the strings tied around documents, and the seal or bulla was made by pressing a seal into a wet lump of clay, and it served as both a signature and a means of ensuring authenticity of documents. So Hezekiah's a genuine person, which we read about tonight, and we're going to see a few other things about his that can collaborate. The next one is Hezekiah's tunnels. Now this is something which I think is a bit of a youth group activity in Israel, to go and walk through, as it's only ankle or knee deep, and you can walk all 533 meters long of it. If you look at verse 30 at the end of 2 Chronicles 32, it says that this saint, so this is at the end of his life, like 29th context, moreover he provided him, God provided to Hezekiah cities and possessions of flocks and herds in abundance, for God gave him substance of very much. Verse 30, this same Hezekiah also stopped the upper watercourse at Gihon and brought it straight down the west side of the city of David. And Hezekiah prospered in all his works. So as mentioned in verse 30, we have the Gihon spring and pool, which is outside the city of David. So you have the end of the wall coming down here, which will join up here, and the Gihon spring is sitting outside the city. So Hezekiah, in his, I suppose, God-given wisdom, decided to bring the Gihon pool, spring pool, in the city and channel a tunnel so that it goes all the way down to the pool of Siloam. So there's fresh water source inside the city, which turned out to be a great idea when Sennacherib comes along. As you can see, it goes along, as it says in verse 30, the west side of the city. So they followed, the words on the next slide, fissure, that's the one I'm after. A fissure in the rock all the way down to the bottom, because halfway through when the two teams met, because one dug up from the pool of Siloam, one from the Gihon Spring, they met in the middle, and you have this inscription that is found. They removed it as soon as they found it, but it was originally there in the tunnel, and it reads, as much as you can with bits missing, that the tunneling, and this is the narrative of the tunneling, while the stone cutters were wielding the picks each towards his co-worker, the picks each towards his co-worker, so coming from the two sides, and while they were yet 3 cubits to the tunnel through, a voice of a man was heard from calling out to his co-worker, because there was a fissure in the rock running from the south to north, and on the final day of tunneling, each of the stone cutters was striking the stone forcibly so as to meet his co-worker, pick after pick, and then the water began to flow from the source of the pool, a distance of 1,200 cubits, and 100 cubits was the height of the rock above the head of the stone cutters. If you come with me to Isaiah chapter 22, it's a very interesting verse came across in relation to Hezekiah's tunnel. So Isaiah chapter 22 and verse 9, when considering the great, I suppose, engineering feat of ancient Israel, that when you come to Isaiah chapter 22 and verse 9, it says, "Ye have also seen the breaches of the city of David." So yes, we're talking about Jerusalem, city of David, "that there are many, and ye have gathered together the pools, the waters of the lower pool." The lower pool being the pool of Siloam. Verse 10, "that when ye have numbered the houses of Jerusalem, and the houses ye have broken down to fortify the wall, ye made," verse 11, "also a ditch between the two walls for a water of the old pool." The old pool being the Gihon Spring. So here we're still talking about the same thing, but halfway through verse 11 it says, "Ye have not looked unto the maker thereof, neither have respect unto him that fashioned it long ago." God long ago, who put this fissure in the rock, and they followed it all the way down. So the fissure that followed all the way down, the two teams followed the same line in the wall, and they came. And I just thought it was a very, very interesting verse in relation to Hezekiah's tunnel. So obviously that goes down to the pool of Siloam, as a show at the bottom, something which you can still visit today in Jerusalem, where you have other significant events around the time of Jesus, especially with the healing of the blind man, where he had to go all the way down to the pool of Siloam, and many lessons you can learn from that. Probably the thing that impressed me most was this Annals of Sennacherib, or Sennacherib cylinder. Now this is something which was discovered in the capital city of Nineveh in Iraq. Nineveh was actually built by Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, the same king that came against Hezekiah in 2 Chronicles 32. It was acquired by the British Museum, as with most things, and has been there since 1855. It states in there that it involved in the destruction of 46 cities in the state of Judah, and the deportation of 200,150 people. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, is said to have sent tribute unto Sennacherib at this time. So it describes the siege of Jerusalem against King Hezekiah, but the record stops there. I think actually a great one, if you come back to 2 Kings 19, which is the parallel record to 2 Chronicles 32, which we had read tonight, but has a bit more detail in there. So in 2 Kings 19, verse 35, "It came to pass that night the angel of Yahweh went out and smote the camp of the Assyrians in 405,000, and when they rose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses." Verse 36, "So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went and returned and dwelt in Nineveh." So I literally copied and pasted the, the translation you can find on the internet, where this is found at the end of Sennacherib's cylinder. So it starts with, as to Hezekiah the Jew, so this is Sennacherib himself writing this. So we've got the same Hezekiah, same Jew. He did not submit to my yoke. I laid siege to 46 of his strong cities and walled forts, as you might know from Bible knowledge, that he came down through the land of Israel and came to Jerusalem, taking all those cities in his wake, and countless small villages in their vicinities. I conquered them by means of well-stamped earth ramps, battering rams brought thus near to the walls, combined with the attack of foot soldiers using mines, as in tunnels, I presume, not bombs because they didn't have them, breaches as well as sapper work, and I drove out of them 200,150 people, young and old, and considered them my booty. Himself, talking about Hezekiah, I made a prisoner in Jerusalem, his royal residence, like a bird in a cage. Now, that's a very interesting phrase. Let's come to Psalm 124. Psalm 124 is a song of degrees. There were, what is accepted, written as by King Hezekiah. So the very same king that is in this predicament against Sennacherib. Psalm 124. Let's go verse 6. Blessed be the Lord, who hath not given us as a prey to their teeth, or our soul has escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken and we are escaped. Our help is in the name of Yahweh, who made heaven and earth. Now, if that isn't a psalm that was written at the same time of Sennacherib encamping or besieging the city of Jerusalem, it fits so well that in the external source we have Sennacherib describing Hezekiah as a bird in a cage, and then in the psalm of praise to God, Hezekiah writes that our soul is escaped as a bird out of the snare. It's just one of those, I don't know, coincidences that I don't think is a coincidence when you come to this story. The inscription goes on to say that he surrounded him with the same earthwork as it says beforehand. He plundered the towns round about. He reduced the other kings round about. Then come to the next bold bit. Hezekiah himself, whom the terror-inspiring splendor of my lordship, you can tell who's writing, had overwhelmed, and whose irregular and elite troops were now brought into Jerusalem. So Hezekiah had retreated everyone back into Jerusalem, which was actually a pretty good place to be for a siege, because he now had the fresh water source in the pool of Siloam from the Gihon spring. So at this point, we're at this point in history where Jerusalem's been sieged by Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and there's no way in, no way out. And funnily enough, the record just keeps on going to say how before that he went back up to Nineveh, which is the city that Sennacherib built, and my lordly city. And I think this is talking about Hezekiah, who previously gave him 30 talents of gold, 800 talents of silver, precious stones, elephant hides, ebony wood, wood boxes. So you can see the riches Hezekiah had, which he ended up losing. And in order to deliver the tribute and to the obeisance as a slave, he sent his personal messengers. And the Sennacherib cylinder stops there. I wonder why. Well, if you come back to, was it 2 Kings 19, verse 35, or 2 Chronicles 32, that you have the angel of the Lord went out and destroyed Sennacherib's army. So he got to Yaphar in boasting about himself, and then, there's not much to write about. So I just found that very much a kind of that works really well with Scripture until Sennacherib is left on his own with his whole army left dead outside of the walls of Jerusalem and sent back to Nineveh. I don't know, very interesting one, which I kind of enjoyed. The last one I want to look at is, and probably a most famous one for the Bible, is Cyrus's cylinder. Now, this was discovered in the ruins of Babylon in 1879. It records the words of the king of Cyrus of Persia around the 6th century BC. It was Cyrus that allowed the Jewish people to go back after being captured by the Babylonians back to the land of Israel, to return to their homeland, to rebuild the cities and rebuild their temple. And ironically, actually it's probably a great one, Isaiah 44, if you turn there with me, Isaiah chapter 44. So Isaiah 44 is a prophecy of this coming King Cyrus. It gives a specific name, which leads to many skeptics of the Bible believing that Isaiah 44 was written after Cyrus took over Babylon, but it's actually a prophecy written beforehand. So in verse 28, the last verse of Isaiah chapter 44, it said that thus saith of Cyrus. So the specific name, Cyrus, is going to come, for he is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid. Isaiah, was it 45 verse 13, so across the page, on the same page, it says, I have raised him, Cyrus, up in righteousness, and I will direct all his ways, and he shall rebuild my city, and he shall let go my captives, not for the price, nor for reward, saith the Lord of hosts. So I actually have the inscription on this slide here, where it actually says, well, the translation of the cylinder is that I have returned these sacred cities on the other side of the Tigris, the sanctuaries which have been in ruins for a long time, the images of which to live in them, and I established them permanent sanctuaries. I also gathered all their former inhabitants and returned them to their habitations. This is specifically talking about the return of the people of Israel from captivity in Babylon. And this is Cyrus himself. Many archaeologists say this is kind of the first document with human rights in, sending people back to establish their sanctuaries in which they lived, to have their own religion again. And so it's very much compelling witness to the Bible, how it reinforces Cyrus here. I don't think we have time to go through the exact returning in, is it Nehemiah? Ezra? Or, nah, let's go. Ezra chapter 1, verse 2 and 3. So at the very start of the book of Ezra, we have now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia. So again, Cyrus the cylinder, the same person we're talking about. Yep. That the word of the Lord came by the mouth of Jeremiah, might be fulfilled, that the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus. Remember, Cyrus is God's shepherd to bring about his children, his nation back to Israel. So he stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that made a proclamation throughout all the kingdom and put it also in writing, potentially this exact cylinder writing. And thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven hath given me the kingdoms of the earth and hath charged me to build them a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. So those exact words aren't found in this cylinder, but they're essentially the same sentiments, the same kind of wording. So very much compelling when you come to archaeology and the Bible. So what we've looked at tonight, I just kind of want to make the point that if all these historical records match up with the Bible, the record of the Bible is true, it's accurate. Well, what else is there in the Bible that's true and that's accurate? When you come to the message of the Bible has many other things to talk about, which is not tonight's topic, where you got the coming of the kingdom of God on earth, that Jesus shall reign and set up God's kingdom. You got salvation through baptism, prophecies of world events that have come to pass and will come to pass, lessons and commandments of God found in the lives of people. As I said, the book of Bible is about people's lives. It's about God interacting with people to reveal himself to them, to give them salvation. So people like Moses, Abraham, Adam, and many miracles, signs, and the teachings of Jesus Christ in the Bible. Now, there's many things out there which have not been discovered or are yet to be discovered, or whether God said that, no, I don't want them to discover that for whatever reason in his divine wisdom. Either way, just because there's no archaeological evidence that something isn't there doesn't mean it exists. Because if you come to archaeology with not believing the Bible, you say, well, this, and this matches this, and this, and this in the Bible, but everything else you can exclude, you're missing the whole point, almost. So to say that having found the Ark of the Covenant doesn't mean that there was temple worship, or that the Ark of the Covenant did exist. Or even the tomb where Jesus lay for 3 nights doesn't mean that it was a real tomb, just because I suppose it'd be physically hard to determine which tomb it would be. But the Bible is more than sufficient in knowledge, in evidence, for us to come to an understanding of God, the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, the God of the house of David, the God of Hezekiah, and even what the Bible offers for those who believe in the gospel or the good news of the Bible. I mean, we have weekly lectures here in the hall going through these various different topics of what the Bible has to say. And so archaeology is just one pillar, as it were, of the reasons of why you can believe in the Bible, why you can believe in Yahweh, the God of the Bible. And well, I suppose it's too late to plug it, but we had a great year in youth group this year, going through the various different things that can increase one's conviction in the truth of the Bible, looking at creation and science, prophecy, logic and consistency of the Bible's message, even the way the Bible's written, how it interweaves and winds throughout the whole of it. And so I urge you to look at it and be convicted in these things. And I thought this was a very interesting verse when considering archaeology. It's not in the context of it, but when at the end of John, the book of John, in the end of his apostle, it says that Jesus did many signs in the presence of his disciples. They're not written in the book of the Bible, that is. They're not written there. It doesn't mean they didn't happen, though. But the things that are written, the things that we do find, they're written that we may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and through believing, you might have life in his name. And so just because something's not there, just as something's not written, doesn't mean it didn't happen. Because as we know in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, without faith it is impossible to please him. But whosoever draws near to God must believe that he exists. You have plenty of evidence you need in the Bible. In archaeology, as we've seen tonight, plenty out there to believe that he exists and that he's the rewarder of them that diligently seek him. So the time that you spend looking into this wonderful book, it's not time that's going to go unspent wisely. So thanks very much for listening, and I hope that was